McQuestion for over 28 years talking about things that matter with people who care. Production of McQuestion is made possible in part by individual viewers, supporters of the Foundation for Responsible Television, the Hatton W. Sumners Foundation, helping to educate the public about the fundamental principles of their democracy and thus be in a position to help formulate public policy. Moss Adams LLP, certified public accountants and consultants, providing industry-smart tax, assurance, and consulting solutions to help businesses and their owners succeed since 1913. The University of Texas at Dallas, creating the future.
President Xi Jinping of China introduced the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, and China continues to push it forward. The questions are, what is it, and what are its implications for America? You won't be surprised to know that we'll answer those questions for you on this program. So let's meet our guest joining us via phone, Cynthia Watson. Cynthia is Professor of Security at the National War College. She served for 5 years as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and then Associate Dean for Curriculum and Faculty Development. Her current research interests include China-Taiwan in Latin America and China's security concerns and its New World posture. Welcome back to the program, Cynthia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's great to be here. I'm sorry I'm not in Dallas.
Well, we are too, I promise you. Here in the studio, Jay Young is Vice President for Market Analysis and Development at Trinity Rail. Based in Dallas, Trinity Rail is the leading provider of integrated freight railcar products and services in North America. Jay, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
And sitting next to you is Dashuan Feng, trained as a theoretical physicist and formerly served as Vice President of Research at the University of Texas at Dallas and Chief Advisor to the China Silk I-Valley Research Institute in China. He's widely published in lectures all over the world, and you sent me a lot of good information to read, most of which I did, some of which I even understood, so I was glad about that. I want to look at graphic number 26 first, Dashuan, and then I want you to tell us a little bit more about what it is. I'd put on here that this was launched, as you know, in 2013 as One Belt, One Road. It involves China underwriting billions of dollars of infrastructure investment in countries along the old Silk Road, linking it with Europe. That's sort of a generic thing. So tell us, and tell that viewer, what it really is and what the implications are.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I just came back from Asia 5 months ago. I spent 10 years in Asia, 7 years in Taiwan, and three years in Macau, and worked very closely in the greater China area. I was, to talk about the Belt and Road, the genesis for me started roughly about 2013 at the end of December that year, where I had to give a keynote speech in a European and Asian University Presidents Conference. And I actually didn't hear much about, because I was in Taiwan at that time, so I didn't hear much about the Belt and Road. As you have already said, 3 months before, Xi Jinping introduced the Belt and Road, but I didn't hear about it in Taiwan. When I had to give the talk to almost 40 top European universities and 16 top Asian university presidents, what I could say that could be meaningful to them, and I'm saying this because it turns out that it's profoundly linked to the Belt and Road Initiative without me realizing it. What I wanted to say is that if Asia and Europe could become a supercontinent, then we could have the possibility of a new renaissance. And to put that together, I think would have a tremendous change in humanity. Now, let's get back to history, a little bit about how this came about. In 1997, when Hong Kong reversed back to China's sovereignty, at that time, China's GDP, now GDP is not everything, but it's something. China's GDP that year was about 0.8 trillion US dollars. US at that time, it's 8.9 or close to 9 trillion US dollars. So China is about 1/10 of the United States. In 2016, couple years after Xi Jinping made the announcement, in 2016, China's GDP, US GDP, was about $19 trillion. China was 11.5. So from a factor of 10, China closed the gap to about a factor of 2. It was at that time the old Texas saying, vision without funding is hallucination, that China began to realize that in order to move in a global sense, they have to do something significantly different than what they have done in the past. Now, why do I say that? Well, in a short sentence, what the Belt and Road Initiative could be thought of for both the land-based and maritime base is to revitalize it. And to revitalize it, you have to do some major mindset transformation in China. Now, why do I say that? Because the early Silk Road, 2,000 years ago.
Just to stop you there for just a second, there might be one viewer who doesn't know what the Silk Road was. Okay, so let's don't assume that they know.
All right.
Okay. So just very briefly, what was the Silk Road, and why are we trying to?
Well, I'll give you one example. In the Song Dynasty, China, in the Song Dynasty's capital is what is called in the town called Kaifeng today. In Song Dynasty, about 1,000 years ago, there were 8,000, that number of Jews living in China. Where did they come from? Well, Jews started to migrate towards the east when they heard from, however, they realized there are opportunities in the east where there's this kingdom with lots of opportunities. So they started to come from the Han Dynasty, and eventually by the time the Song Dynasty came around, there were 8,000 Jews. How did they get there? Well, they get there by slowly migrating along this road from the west, from Palestine, from Europe, from Iran, from Iraq, and so on and so forth, migrating towards China.
And that became known as the Silk Road.
So the Silk Road is not a road.
Right.
Okay.
It's a trade.
The Silk Road is a trade way
corridor.
of getting.
Right. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, so now go ahead and just very briefly bring us up to date about what the Belt and Road is compared to that.
To talk about the modern Belt and Road, let's just call it the modern Silk Road. Well, what's the difference? The difference is the ancient Silk Road didn't have an ancient Xi Jinping. It just happened organically. And because China was so powerful and so strong in those days that, for example, we would have 8,000 Jews living in China. You don't hear about 8,000 Chinese